So thanks so much for coming. So this is HackDemocracy and HacksHackers meetup about Egypt. And so first I wanted to say a quick word to present what are those two different meetups. So basically HackDemocracy is a new meetup here in San Francisco, and there's also a chapter in Brussels about where basically hackers meet democracy. And it's basically a community of hackers who really who are passionate, who care about democracy and how we can actually, using hacker skills, how can we make our democracies better using new technologies. So it's really a place where we want to celebrate innovations from our democracy. So the topic of tonight is obviously very interesting to see how technology, social media and so on has been used in Egypt. So really looking forward to this. And also Hacks and Hackers, which is where hackers meet democracy. And I'm going to pass the mic to Saidi, who's going to talk about it.
So I'm Bert's proxy today. So Hacks and Hackers was started over a year ago by Bert Herman, and I think this is the first San Francisco meetup he's ever missed. So we should give him a big hand next time. And it's actually gone global. There's Hacks and Hackers in Austin, in New York, and in London now, Boston, but this is the original one. And so we're trying to bring journalists, which is the hacks, together with coders, which is the hackers, or people who consider themselves bi-curious with both, and get people thinking about new and creative ways. We've done some hackathons, one in GAFTA, Hack Tenderloin, and we're also thinking of working on workshops, classes. So if you're interested in helping create a new event or be on a panel, please see me or Xavier. Xavier's also been on this from the beginning, and we're trying to come up with new stuff also. We're working on some East Bay oriented stuff as well. So that's about it. Oh, the hashtag for Hacks and Hackers is HacksHackers, no and in the middle. And the hashtag for HackDemocracy is? HackDemocracy. So we're going to have like dueling hashtags. And so you can use one or either or both, depending on your fancy.
And also we really want to thank GAFTA, who is hosting us tonight. So this is the space where they basically host exhibitions about data visualization. They do really great stuff. So donations are for them, so thank you for your generosity. It's thanks to that we can keep those events free. And so yeah, so thank you very much for them. So yeah. So today's presentation, so we have Amir here, who is Egyptian, living in the Bay Area, who is obviously has been following all the events really closely. He's also a hacker, we can say so. So he's going to be part of the panel tonight. He's going to do a recap of the events. We also have Rio, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Who did really a cool stuff, a cool data visualization with all the tweets on Twitter about the event. So he's gonna present that in a minute. And also we have the honor to have two producers from Al Jazeera who's been following obviously the event and covering the event, as you probably know. And so they're gonna present, tell the story of how did that go. So really looking forward to that. So maybe actually we're gonna start with data visualization, so that after that we can do a panel with Amir and Al Jazeera, and it's going to be really something really dynamic, so don't hesitate to ask questions. You can ask the question on Twitter, but also we can pass the mic to ask your questions.
Just a bit of a background on myself. I'm a first-year master's student in computer science at Stanford, and Xavier was nice enough to get in touch with me. No, actually it'll be the winners. So I am more of a shower rather than an explainer. I'm not very good at explaining things. So I'll let the data explain it for itself, and then maybe have a little more time for questions. So what you'll see right here is actually... Right, well, let's just give it... So what you're seeing right here, I'll explain it in a little more detail, but these are geolocated tweets on a map. And it's a very simple interface, but if there's a little hackery involved, and that's the Google exact file. Does anyone want to see it again?
What was the hashtag that they all had?
So the hashtag for this one is actually Egypt. And I'll explain a little bit about the rationale for that. If you pay attention to the times. Yeah.
What's that?
So the first burst of tweets that happens is actually when Moubarak first talks about whether or not he's going to step down. And these are times in PST. It turns out to be around 10:30 Egypt local time. And by the time when you continue, the second burst that happens right around now is when Moubarak actually, or Omar Suleiman, Vice President, actually tells on national televised address that he was, Moubarak was no longer in control.
So in total, how many tweets?
So for this particular one, and if I can pull up can I pull up a page? Okay. If you go to, and feel free to take a look at this when you have the chance. What this is actually is an aggregate of. This is the actual map. So this is actually going to show you a quick aggregate. The total number of tweets was 667,000 during that 1 week period between February 7th and February 14th. The rationale for using Moubarak is a little hard to see here, but what you can see here are the total number of counts of tweets. And the first row up here actually shows a few logistic issues. Alright, so there you can see tweets. I did 2 rounds. First of all for Moubarak, for the keyword Moubarak. Actually, they're right here. These are the keywords for Moubarak. Geolocation on Twitter is a little bit of a finicky thing, so I'm displaying right below here the amount of tweets that were successfully geolocated. And if you actually take a look at the counts, this is about 2,000. So in a single minute at that point, there were 2,000 tweets. And if you compare this to the giant Egypt tweet that you see right below, and feel free to take a look at this in your own time, this is actually about 6,000 tweets per minute at that single minute. And so the compelling use case here was to use the keyword Egypt, just because it was encompassing, and there's a word cloud involved as well. But the overwhelming idea was Egypt was always in line with Moubarak. Yes?
Just 2 questions. First of all, did you look at Jan 25 as a hashtag? And second of all, are you pulling this from a track feed or is it through the search API?
Okay, so the question was, am I doing this live or am I retrieving this from the search API, and why didn't I use January 25? The thing with Twitter Dots, and this project itself is called Twitter Dots, is that it uses information live. It aggregates information live. And so at the point that I made the decision to use, or to start collecting data, and this is data from the Twitter streaming API, so there are no sort of control mechanisms for the number of tweets that come in. I had made at that point the choice to use Egypt. But January 25 would have been equally interesting.
But the streaming API, you mean like one of the hoses? Or
yes, the fire
track
hose.
feed on the pound Egypt?
Pardon me?
Because there's 2 parts of the streaming API, so you're saying it's the garden hose?
Of the 2 parts, it's the fire hose, yes.
The fire hose.
Yes, it's a full stream. Yeah.
So going back to the map you displayed, it's
Yes.
a little hard to make a statistical conclusion with your eyeballs, but it appears that the vast majority of the activity are either on the two coasts of the U.S. or in Northern Europe. Now, that may be just a gross kind of number compared to percentage of the population. It's hard quite to decide what to conclude from that.
That's a good point, and I think it relates to the question here whether or not social media is intrinsically tied to the revolution. And I'm not really here to make an assessment or garner any conclusions. I think what's powerful about this is that there was worldwide attention on the topic at those particular moments in ways that really captured the Twitter sphere. And I wanted to be able to represent that in a pretty simplistic manner, but nonetheless, get the point across.
Yeah, but is it reasonable to conclude that the amount of what you see somehow reflects the relative activity in that particular hashtag?
Well, so the question is it reasonable to assume that it's actually a reflection of the number of activity in that? And I failed to mention these single dots. Every single dot represents a tweet. And the reason why it slows down is this is not done using Flash. This is JavaScript and Google Maps for those who are interested in the technology. But each single dot that you see here, the more opaque or the more translucent they are, the fewer the count is. So if they start stacking up one on top of each other, it's an indicator that there are more at that particular location.
If a journalist wants to do this kind of visualization for Libya, how they can do that?
Actually, that's a really good question. I'm currently running one whole sort of longitudinal study on Libya. The wonderful tool, the wonderful part about this tool is that it's really easy to deploy. If you are journalists who want to examine the impact of a particular event that may unfold in the future, I can provide the services really easily to just deploy it and run it. The only limitation here is hardware. It's really not sort of the configurations that are here.
Should people just contact you?
Yes, by all means. The reason why I'm here is really because I think there are many opportunities to take advantage of this in ways that maybe Twitter hasn't made easy. Because the reason why these kinds of visualizations haven't happened is because Twitter doesn't provide location-specific tweets. If you tweet with your geocoding enabled, you'll actually, you'll see those on a map. You could see those. But the percentage of people who actually provide their specific location when they tweet is about 10% from the data that I've been able to do. So what I'm doing right now is actually taking the user's own defined location. Let's say you say San Francisco. Let's say I'm at Stanford. I'll say Stanford. So even though I'm not specifically within that location, I'll say that I'm located there. And that covers about 75%. And a lot of the objections that come up is that it's probably very noisy, and that's true, but you get a good rough metric for where a person is located. Yeah.
One of the things that we struggled with is, I think a lot of people were self-identifying for Egypt without being there, and it looked like from your visualization that the Nile never went dark. What was your approach to that? And it is self-selected location you're measuring?
That's correct. So there will be individuals who have said Egypt is their location even if they are here. I think one of the benefits of having such a large amount of data is that even though there is noise, that noise can be occluded by the amount of good information.
Hi, my name is Ahmed. So it's me and that's Ben, and we both work in DC on the programming side actually, so not news, at Al Jazeera English. Maybe it's worth, just for my personal kind of interest, and I think it might help us figure out how to talk about these issues. And to be frank, even though we do a lot of talking amongst ourselves, the idea tonight is to field questions, hopefully, rather than talking. Hopefully this video that we're going to show you will speak for itself. But quickly, how many of you have watched Al Jazeera? Just a show of hands. English, right? Okay. He's doubling as a cameraman, editor, producer. This isn't propaganda.
If you don't mind, I can blur faces if everyone.
This is loud. It's really loud, right? Sorry, I should mic it away. Okay. So let's start this way. About a year ago, how many of you had been watching Al Jazeera relatively regularly? Okay, so like 8 people, maybe 9, if you include me. And how about the past couple weeks? Great. Cool. Well, that's helpful to us. I guess I should start by saying we actually are developing a new show called The Stream. And The Stream is going to be a talk show, but it's a kind of geared social media show where we discuss these kinds of issues that are kind of popping up and tapping into communities, social networks, as well as different online communities, and kind of discuss how online tools are used, even, maybe have some hacktivists or some hackers on our show. I mean, we're really trying to, maybe via Skype with the face blacked out if they want. The idea is to kind of continue the conversation that's already kind of predominating the media kind of channels. And it's a lot of people are saying, oh, you guys really responded quickly, but the reality is we've been working on this show before the events in Tunisia unfolded. And this video that we're going to show you is actually a little sort of video package that we put together for a show called Empire a couple weeks ago. And basically, it's probably also worth mentioning that the reason we're here is to meet with guys like Storify and different, as you guys know in this area, there's a lot of different companies that are kind of going to be an integral part of our show in the sense of we want to collaborate with, Facebook, Twitter, and a bunch of others, Storify as well. And so, just to take it back to this, we put this video together to kind of tell the story of, as we saw it, because we came in at the end of December, January, and we were kind of across the social networks because for our purposes we needed to understand how they worked, what we wanted to do editorially with the show, how it would all unfold, and in doing so, I started to see tweets from Tunisia, and it was kind of my boss said, okay, well today what I want you to do, aside from all the other housekeeping stuff, is just focus on trolling the networks, and kind of finding out what's being spoken about. And we started to see...
First effort at turning it all into a narrative.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this is, and I'll stop talking, but the point is we wanted to see what was happening, and we found kind of that there was, warnings of trouble to come, but the mainstream media wasn't covering it. Al Jazeera wasn't really covering it. Yet in December. And this package kind of is an attempt to tell the story that through our eyes as to how social media was used, and its significance, as I believe you said, has often been debated, and everyone's talking about whether we should call these things Twitter or Facebook revolutions. But we'll show the video, and then happy to answer questions or later. We're having sound trouble. You might have to listen to me talk. Maybe I can answer a couple questions. Oh, there you go.
No, we're good.
Damn.
Sorry. You can talk. All right.
After more than 2 decades of rule by
Tunisia's revolution has marked its place in history.
Tunisia is now a country in chaos.
But it didn't happen overnight. Mainstream woke up to the story. Tweets, photos, and videos began popping up on the internet from Tunisia, warning of trouble to come. A fruit and vegetable seller from Sidi Bouzid had set himself on fire on December 18th, and suddenly, reactions on the Twitterverse were exploding. Following the hashtag Sidi Bouzid, I called up hundreds of photos and videos showing students protesting, police abuses, and sporadic gunfire. As the messages went viral, protests broke out across the world showing solidarity with Tunisia.
Tunisia unrest makes waves in Lausanne.
Demo tomorrow outside the Tunisian embassy in London.
A flash mob is planned in Berlin on Saturday.
The beginning of a revolution was unfolding, and the mainstream media was just beginning to catch up.
There are no reporters in Tunisia to tell us what's really happening.
The mass media has totally failed.
Terrorism equals lots of media coverage. Democratic revolution equals little media coverage.
Tunisia's government began hacking into and deleting Facebook accounts. Protesters called for help from hacktivist groups.
An unprecedented crackdown on social media
Censorship should get in touch with hacktivism.
We really need a local version of Anonymous in the Arab world.
And soon enough, another hashtag appeared across the network. Anonymous.
The Tunisian government has decided it wants to restrict the freedoms of their own people. In doing so, the Tunisian government has made itself an enemy of Anonymous.
Within a matter of hours, Anonymous launched Operation Tunisia, paralyzing the president's site, several key ministries, and the stock exchange. The group also shared a cyber war survival guide, sharing cables from WikiLeaks documenting Ben Ali's corruption, tips on running from cops, and proxy sites to access Facebook and Twitter. The government quickly countered with a phishing operation, stealing Facebook and email passwords to spy on activists and obliterate online dissent. But tweets continued to spread, documenting a society's breakdown.
The internet is reportedly cut off from city.
People are creating barricades to protect their neighborhood.
Students demonstrating in Libya, 50 miles.
Injured young man shot by police in his back in Kufsa.
For a full week, I watched the story unfold online, speaking to activists, using Facebook and Twitter as protests turned bloody. And on January 12th, with Ben Ali's regime on the verge of collapse, Time magazine finally found the story. But the social networks had the best coverage. A new power structure emerged, and protests had spread to other countries, and governments scrambled to buy time.
Algeria steps up grain imports.
Dollar at Jordan sacks government.
Plus free food for a year to keep calm.
But the anger had already rooted itself inside Arab minds. Through social networks, Egyptians had began drawing connections in late December.
Egyptians should copy the Tunisia revolt.
Toppling their dictator. That will start a chain reaction in the Arab world.
Tunisia solidarity demo on Sunday.
Inspired by Tunisia's success, finally, the fear factor had broken. January 25th, a public holiday in Egypt, marking the day in 1952 that saw police back up the Egyptian people's resistance against British occupation. As people organized, they drew upon Tunisia's success, sharing pamphlets on peaceful protesting and self-defense. They made plans to circumvent police barricades, quickly capturing the world's attention. But Moubarak also learned from Tunisia. On January 27th, just as President Obama appeared live on YouTube answering questions from the public, Egypt's president took the unprecedented step of shutting down the internet. But he was too late. The World Wide Web was against him. The accounts of police abuse and violence circulated online, including footage that the Associated Press picked up showing what some have called Egypt's Neda moment. A coalition of volunteers, organizations, and activists set up platforms to get the message out.
Egyptians, email me if you want to post info on Twitter.
To break the block on Twitter, use this proxy.
Numbers for legal aid and requesting lawyers. 010.
Even journalists in Egypt used their cell phones to send tweets to friends who relayed their messages.
Internet's still down in Egypt. We'll continue to tweet.
She is safe. She just doesn't have internet access. So I'm tweeting on her behalf.
To stop any news getting out, the government went after the meeting. Journalists were detained, and the US government, which had been waffling in its response, turned to Twitter to make their voice heard.
We are concerned by the shutdown of Al Jazeera in Egypt and the arrest of its correspondents. Egypt must be opened and the reporters released.
30 minutes later, our journalists were released, showing that even governments can use social media to get things done. Okay, it's funny, every time I watch that, I think, wow, that actually happened. Like, the whole story. And I think it's maybe worth mentioning that when I first started looking for things or saw things coming out of Tunisia, one of the things I saw was, and we all saw, was students saying, oh, there's no school, this and that, and there's, unrest, and very vague kind of abstract terms. And that's when we decided to call them, Skype them, kind of ask them if they would tell us what's going on, give us some context. So even though we were using Skype and these kinds of new online tools, it was just the natural, I guess you could say traditional kind of, we wanted to hear it from sources on the ground. And I think you mentioned it's important to kind of identify where these messages are coming from. There's so many things to talk about, and I could sit here and continue to talk, but I'd much rather hear from you. So, anybody? Or we could all go have drinks. Yes?
Where can we find that video online?
We'll put up.
Yeah, it's on Al Jazeera's YouTube channel. It's also on Al Jazeera English's, if you type in Empire, which is the program that it appeared on. It's on my Facebook page.
We're gonna post it. We're gonna post it on the meetup group. So.
Yeah, it's around.
Al Jazeera YouTube page?
Yeah, if you just type in social media, social revolution, it should come up. Al Jazeera. Yeah, we can show you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So, first of all, you guys did an amazing job covering the events and so forth, so thanks very much. But there's one thing I was curious about. As sort of infrastructure was pulled out and Al Jazeera kept recording and kept broadcasting however they could, I was curious how, as a group of reporters, your style of communication changed, and then secondly, did you get an indication of how the Egyptian people were coordinating their efforts now as their primary method of communications were cut? Their numbers and the protests still grew, and organizations seemed to grow. So one side, like as a set of journalists, second side, what did you see from the
Could I repeat the question? It's twofold. One, how did we operate when censorship and there was a shutdown and there was, our licenses were actually revoked and, all of that. And I think also how did the Egyptian people themselves or the protesters communicate? Is that correct? And get the word out and whatnot. It's a good question because the reality is, when our journalists, for example, when the internet was shut down, so to speak, we were already having a lot of journalists tweeting and, kind of relaying information that way. For a lot of reasons. I mean, things were happening really quickly, and our journalists, it's not like they're instructed to tweet. I think they just, because they're kind of like you all, I'd imagine, educated people and realize that it's a real-time tool to get the message out, and they have a lot of followers and whatnot. I mean, we have one correspondent who wasn't there. This is an anecdote. Her name's Dima Khatib, and she's a Latin American correspondent. She reached the maximum, I think, of 1,000 tweets a day, so it's like essentially 2 tweets every minute or something. So I guess she wasn't doing her day job, which is fine. But the point is, someone with that kind of a platform is tweeting that much, I think is indicative of the fact as to why they were doing that. When the shutdown happened, what started to happen is it kind of, we talk about social media and we talk about traditional media, but it's all kind of one and the same, and revolutions are often always related to what type of media is available at the time. So when you couldn't connect to Twitter or to Facebook or to anything, and the broadcast signal also was, scrambled and whatnot by the Egyptian government, they turned to phones, text messaging. So what happened, and I think that's how you saw the eventual development of the Google and Twitter startup was Speakeasy. There have been many, and we were kind of using a lot in the Arab world as well, where they were transcribing tweets. So our reporters would find friends, essentially, who were living abroad, just like you saw in the package. There were some of the tweets from our reporters, Ayman Mohildin and Shireen Tadros. And they just basically tell their friends, they'd kind of choose that one friend who let them sleep on their couch, I guess, when they were in London or wherever there was internet. And they'd have, a trusted source, so to speak, and they would send text messages and then they would tweet on their behalf. And I think as that kind of slowly emerged, you started to see that replicated amongst ordinary citizens, where, certain people who are activists who do have internet would put out these kind of, hey, email me what's happening in Egypt and stuff like, things like that, and then, they would then tweet on their behalf. So mainly that was kind of, I think, in a way you could call it a phenomenon, so to speak. I mean, the beauty about, I think, activism and trying to be civically engaged or get the word out in situations where you are either oppressed or where you don't have access to media is that you'll always find a way to kind of circumvent it, and that was the main way. To be honest with you, with regards to your second part of your question, I was surprised to hear this when our reporters came back and reported this. A lot of people, it was word of mouth, to be quite honest with you. A lot of people didn't know what was going on. Of course, they did use cell phones a lot, text messaging campaigns, not just amongst ordinary citizens, but also the government used it in a way, and Vodafone sent out messages. They spoke through text messaging and things like that. But word of mouth played a huge role, actually. And every time people would leave Tahrir Square, they would say, go bring more people with you. And these were in the last waning days when it seemed like Moubarak might actually step down, but then he didn't. And so there was kind of this, they were getting the message, few people who did have access to internet, because some people did. I'm not sure if you know, there were like 4 ISP providers and stuff like that, but some, I think it was 88% was the penetration, like that was how many people didn't have internet, I guess if you do it in percentages. So a lot of it was word of mouth, which I think is interesting. Sorry, I think I took a long time there.
Yeah, the thing is, I just want to invite actually Amir, who was, this is working. I wanted to invite Amir also, who was an Egyptian. living here in the Bay Area, and to have his point of view of how he's been following the event through social media and what did work, what didn't work.
Hi, my name is Amir Khella. I've been in the US for the past 10 years, Bay Area for about 3 years. And from my point of view, it's very interesting because one of the people who left Egypt because of the frustration and the suppression that was there. And it's almost not giving up, but it's like a lot of Egyptians came here on the hope that one day we'll be able to go back and give back. But we never knew when that day would be. And we've always looked, lately we've been looking at Egypt from like social media lens and what they've been giving us on that limited view of what's going on in the country. I'm not one of the people who watches TV though, and I'm actually honestly happy that I didn't, because the view that people were getting from TV was significantly different from what we're getting on Facebook and Twitter. And what happened is, like, if you remember a year ago, there was a couple of years ago, the April 6th movement, and there wasn't much critical mass for this to make a real change. And when I started having friends seeing their statuses on Facebook and people saying, you know, there's another revolution happening and we're going to go and gather in Tahrir. And I'm lucky to have seen some of the critical leaders in these movements arise early. And they were very, like, they're not some of the people who are very politically literate, but they are educated. They're not, like, this revolution was not started by people who were poor or who were, you know, didn't have a good chance in the country yet. But, you know, on the other hand, it's like people who were living very well but wanted that kind of lifestyle for everyone else. And it didn't start because someone wanted a better job or someone wanted even freedom. It was just, we didn't want to live under this kind of, we didn't want to beg for a piece of bread, and we didn't want to walk in the street knowing that it's dangerous, not knowing if I'm going to get home or not because some police officers decided that I shouldn't. But two topics that I wanted to talk about quickly related to social media. The first one is how I've seen Facebook in this specific use case, how I've seen Facebook as the leader for that revolution, and Twitter is allowed the world to follow it. Like, basically seeing how these little spots or little trigger points, people are rising on Facebook and how their statuses have been shared and the videos have been shared, and you can see the critical mass. It's almost like you can see it virtually. There is a mass forming around them. And then Twitter started from the rest of the world. That's the first one. The second one is how Facebook and Twitter, I was talking with Xavi about this. This is very closely related to what Storify is doing. I'm probably one of the few Egyptians that my friends have in their networks. And when I started seeing what's going on in Egypt, and I started retweeting and sharing and liking different people's statuses from my network, it's almost like I acted as a lens through which my international friends saw what was going on in Egypt. And they started following me. More people started following because they wanted to get my perspective about what I was seeing through my eyes onto my network and streaming to the rest of the network. So having said that, it was a big emotional moment for people living here, especially because first we couldn't be there. And at the same time, we were there through the eyes of social media. I think Jazeera did an amazing job on covering this. I had it literally I have a projector at home. I was hooking it up to my laptop and I was projecting on the wall 24/7, and I had people friends stopping by, crashing on the couch so that they can watch what was going on in Egypt together. So, amazing job, guys. Yeah.
So if you looked at one of the hashtags when this was all going on Twitter, you saw lots of things go by, some in English, some not. A lot were in Arabic. assume, which I don't read. Can you characterize how those were different? I mean, were they very different? The two, if you divided out the English versus the Arabic streams, were they very different from one another? Did they say similar things or totally different things? Or?
So the question is, the different hashtags on Twitter and in different languages
The same hashtag would have two
different languages.
Two different languages.
Let me remember. I think they were pretty much saying the same things. I think the majority of the, if I see the top hashtags, there were some of them, like, there was one that we, 1,000 people retweeted immediately, which was the progress bar. It says uninstalling democracy 99, uninstalling Moubarak 99% done. There were a few ones that were funny. The ones in Arabic tended to be the ones that had the most, the least buzz and the most meaning for me, because they were really coming from the source rather than an interpretation or a comment or an opinion on something.
I agree. I mean, it's probably worth mentioning I'm not Egyptian, but I did grow up in Egypt for almost 10 years when I was a child using ICQ and all that stuff, and so it's funny how far we've all come. But with regards to your question, I thought it was worth mentioning that with regards to Arabic, it wasn't even the Arabic tweets that weren't coming from Egypt. I think they tended to be, because they knew their audience was different. When you're writing or you're tweeting in English from Tahrir Square, a lot of the tweets had a lot to do with Western media. They were kind of call-outs, trying to guide the people who were abroad, as he said. And it wasn't as much an internal discussion of the kind of events and their implications. And I think there was also, maybe not less emotion, but it was more commands and kind of messages and trying to get information out. In Arabic, there was, I think, a lot more, not even a discussion, it's hard to really, I don't know how to explain it, but there was kind of, because they knew that this was like also targeted in a way to their brothers across the border in Tunisia and in other countries in the region, and I think that's kind of where the patterns started to emerge. It's true, Google and Twitter set up, those kinds of call us and we'll tweet if you don't have access to Twitter initiatives, but then you started to see a lot replicated, and people, I think maybe like yourself, who were aware that there would be a difference between English and Arabic, started to create similar kind of initiatives that were volunteer-based. Like, for example, a friend of mine, he's kind of an online entrepreneur. His name's Habib Haddad. He started Yamli, which is a transliteration service, so you can type like, shukran, which is thank you in Arabic, and you type it in English and it writes it in Arabic. But the point is, he started this website with a friend called Alive in Egypt. And the idea was to translate a lot of the tweets, but also a lot of phone calls when people would call in, because they were trying to kind of jump over that obstacle of reaching a wider audience, so to speak. So there were so many different developments online in trying to do that.
I want to quickly jump on what you just said and asking, like, what were for you the most important hacks that have been done? So many people, hackers, have developed things, I just say, translating Arabic. What were the most important tools that you've been using, and what was lacking? What hackers here in this room, what they can do to contribute to make sure that in the future you can make your job easier? And that is valid for you as well, to keep up with your friend in Egypt, actually.
So I think from my perspective, I've seen the Alive in Egypt, and I followed a lot of their translations. But I think one of the best hacks I've seen was actually a Facebook page. And it started, I think, the same day the revolution started. It was called RNN. And it's, I think it was short for Reporter News Network. And it was probably one of the best ideas I've seen in the past 10 years. And it's simply phone numbers where you can call or text and leave a text message or a voicemail, and these people actually take that and match them with different messages coming from the same location, and they figure out if this is a true event or just someone making a rumor, and they will post events coming from these text messages. So these people were posting like a status every few minutes, or sometimes less than a minute, and it was basically it's almost like people generating news network where you see it's almost like a Twitter feed coming from text messages in one page, curated and organized by few people sitting next to phones or cell phones, getting these different messages from different locations. That for me, it was the best thing I've seen during that revolution.
Forgive me, I'm going to be a bit general and probably more brief. I didn't know about that, so that's extremely interesting. But what I would say is, it's not to state the obvious, but and perhaps my purview is a bit different, but with regards to people like Anonymous, I mean, granted, shutting down the key ministries in Tunisia and other, the president's site and different sites sends a message. I don't know how effective it is other than sending a message in terms of practical use, but finding ways to circumvent, I think just generally, like they did by sending out these kinds of care packages, I mean, the kinds of information that they made available to people, I think is extremely useful. I don't know how central a role it played, but also any sort of hack, any sort of site, anything that you do on whatever platform, and forgive me, I'm not a hacker, so I mean, I wish I were, but I'm not. I don't know much in terms of what it did, but anything that connects people who otherwise wouldn't be connected and provides them with information, whether it's because of language or anything, or different communities, I think that's something I would say would be extremely useful. And Ben will like to say something.
That's right, thanks. I just wanted to tell a quick anecdote in order to say that I think it's a problem that a lot of communities face that deal with very technical things. When talking to the media, so I have a friend who's pretty active within the movement who contacted me one night to say, I've been watching the Al Jazeera ticker for 48 hours, waiting for alternate ISPs to show. And that was something that wasn't occurring to the guy running the ticker. It just wasn't even on his radar. And it took a little bit of convincing on our part to get that information there. And actually, I fell asleep after trying to get it there and convincing who I think were the right people. And when I woke up, it was a completely different situation. It was no longer on the ticker. But I think that it made it there, and I hope so. But the point of that is to, don't assume that things are too technical. Do reach out to journalists. Do help them understand the anthropological channels of the technical side of things, because it's a real challenge.
And I think there are a lot of questions, but I'll say that helped me as a journalist who didn't know much about some of the technical aspects when it was explained how exactly did Moubarak shut down the internet, and there was a whole backlog, tons of blogs, different, I don't know if those are hacks per se, but people who understand that language and being able to explain it to journalists. So I think that also, as we see, there's like a domino effect in the region. A lot of people didn't think that would happen, but I think that influences how revolutions change from Libya to whatever's next, Algeria.
Okay, there are many questions, so we're going to take some questions. So there was the one just at the corner, and then we go to you.
I have a couple. One is, I just am interested in the whole process of moving from a shutdown by Moubarak to creating Anonymous, like how that worked, number one. And number two, as a journalist, I'm also interested in knowing some, real key examples, other examples, specific examples of tweets that show the difference between what tweets do and what mainstream media does.
Yes.
Great. Forgive me, I didn't fully understand the first question, or maybe I didn't hear it. Could you just very briefly repeat it?
Sure. I was interested in the film that showed the kind of how Moubarak shut down access to the internet, took people off of Facebook and what have you, and then Anonymous appeared as a kind of a portal, a way through for people to communicate. I'd like to understand that.
Yeah, I think maybe we weren't either clear in the video or perhaps you misunderstood. Anonymous was already around and already actively, it's a group, it's a hacktivist group that is essentially inserting itself into the conversation by saying, kind of in a way pledging allegiance with the protesters and saying, you can't prevent these people from having access to information, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, because of how powerful those tools are. I think was the second part of your question. But Anonymous didn't come and provide a platform by which people could communicate per se. So, I hope that answers the question. Okay, I feel horribly that I can't answer it.
I think WikiLeaks had
Well, it's, yeah, not WikiLeaks.
Yeah, I know.